Ireland has a fairly cool maritime climate, not getting very hot in the summer, but also not getting very cold in the winter. We can grow lots of different vegetable crops without any protection, especially those that prefer cooler conditions, such as a lot of the brassica family of plants. But we usually need to provide some sort of additional protection to get a good and reliable crop out of a lot of the vegetable plants that prefer warmer growing conditions, and to extend the growing season of others. Stretching a big sheet of plastic over a metal frame to produce a polytunnel can be one of the best options for creating this warmer microclimate in this context, and I grow in 3 of these relatively simple structures. As long as they are built well, they can last a long time without any additional maintenance, but regularly washing the plastic both inside and outside can be really important, mainly to make sure that as much sunlight can get in as possible, and this is one of those jobs that I should probably be doing more often. There are lots of contexts where a polytunnel can be really useful for creating a better microclimate for growing plants, but it does depend on the climate. Some places are probably too hot to use a polytunnel or a hoop house like this, except for maybe overwintering crops, and other places are probably too cold to really be worth it. But in the Irish climate, the polytunnel is useful for improving the yield and range of crops available all year round. The plastic traps in the heat from the sun, mainly by not letting it rise so quickly or be blown away by the wind, and it keeps out the heavy rain and strong winds which can damage the plants. But the plastic is not a great insulator, and the overnight temperatures tend to be only marginally higher than the outside temperatures, even though the daytime temperatures can be significantly higher. It can get too hot in a polytunnel in Ireland, especially if I forget to open up the doors at both ends on a sunny day. But we generally get enough wind to keep these spaces relatively well ventilated and prevent them from getting too hot. Whenever the doors are closed to reduce the ventilation, this can significantly increase the humidity, which can cause some issues with plants, and the inside surface of the plastic is almost always covered with condensation. This layer of condensation probably helps to prevent the plastic itself from getting overly hot in the summer. And we usually get a fair amount of rain throughout the year, or at least rarely get long periods of hot and dry conditions. So the plastic is often wet on both sides, and we don't have the really hot or the really cold conditions that would prevent the growth of algae on both the inside and outside of the plastic sheet. And this buildup of algae can significantly reduce the amount of sunlight that can enter the polytunnel if it is not removed regularly. I used to find that the inside of the sheet of plastic was easier to clean than the outside, mainly because it was easier to reach with a broom. But as I added more support wires to help hang plants from the polytunnel structure, and also hung sprinkler irrigation pipes from the same structure, all of this stuff gets in the way. There are often the remains of leaves where tall plants such as climbing beans had pressed up against the polytunnel plastic. The lower part of the plastic at the edge of the growing space also tends to have the remains of leaves, but also usually has a greater buildup of algae. This was especially the case with all of the squash plants that we grew in this smaller polytunnel last year, where the large leaves pressed up against the plastic provided shaded conditions for the algae to grow even more. Whenever I get around to cleaning the polytunnel, there's usually enough condensation on the inside surface to keep the plant debris and algae wet enough so that it is easier to wipe off than it would have been if it was dry. But I usually spray the plastic with water from a hose first to make sure that the entire surface is wet and to dislodge some of the dirt and the remains of plants. And then I brush down the whole surface before washing it down with a hose again. When a lot of organic matter has had a chance to build up, it tends to be easier to wipe it down twice with a cloth or broom and to rinse it twice in order to make sure all of it is removed. I really should do this washing of the inside of the plastic more often, at least after every crop is removed, as it really does seem to increase the amount of light that comes into the space. But every time I wash the plastic like this, there is a chance of scratching the surface, something that I did a few years ago when I mistakenly used a brush with fairly stiff bristles. But even using a soft cloth or brush, bits of sand or debris can become embedded in the material and can cause damage. But I try to avoid this by not washing too close to the soil surface. And I always check any broom head or other equipment to make sure there aren't any sharp points or edges that can scratch the plastic. I don't think small scratches like this would be enough to decrease the strength of the plastic, but it could roughen the surface, which would make it easier for algae and other biology to become established. When rinsing down the plastic, I usually use a hose to try to flush out any debris that may be stuck in between where the plastic meets the metal frame. This may also remove any insects or other creatures that may be sheltering in these crevices, which would be a good thing if they were pests, but not so great if they were hibernating beneficial insects or spiders. And I suspect that all of this might help flush away any disease spores that are on the surface and in the crevices, which might otherwise end up on the next crop through drops of condensation. So cleaning the inside of the polytunnel plastic and structure will hopefully help reduce the chance of diseases or pests from passing from one crop or season to the next, but I'm not sure how effective or important this is. I generally only use water when cleaning the inside of the polytunnel like this, and I find that it usually does a pretty good job. But I do wonder if it might be useful to start using a biodegradable soap, or even something that might be more effective at reducing the risk of disease and pest issues, and perhaps help clean the polytunnel plastic faster and better. The outside surface of the plastic can also get quite dirty, even with all the rain that we get. The main issue outside generally seems to be the remains of bird shit, and we have a lot of birds in the area, especially a big colony of rooks and jackdaws. While some of the bird shit is washed off, some of it remains, and it seems that with a combination of providing something to attach onto and the nutrients that it contains, these bird droppings are great for the algae. And if the plastic isn't cleaned, over just a few years, the surface can become really heavily covered with algae and the growth of other organisms. And all this prevents any additional bird droppings, dust, or other material from washing away, which makes things worse for light transmission, but better for this new ecosystem. If the summer isn't hot enough for the winter cold enough to kill it off, or if the wind and rain isn't strong enough to remove it, then this process just continues. With the humid conditions and the moderate climate that we have in most parts of Ireland, everything eventually becomes covered with algae and moss. When cleaning the outside surface of the plastic, I find it easier to spray it with water first and let it soak in, which makes it a lot easier to remove any of the material. This is one of the few tasks in the gardens that is actually easier in the rain, or at least between heavy rain showers, where the wet algae and other material can be easily dislodged by a broom or cloth, and then the rain can wash the plastic clean before it dries again. I used to do this task with a hose and a broom, and often had to stand on a stepladder and use something to extend the broom handle to reach the top of the polytunnel. But then I learned that it was a lot easier to use a sheet or towel tied to ropes over either side of the polytunnel. And with the help of somebody else, we could pull this fabric back and forth over the curved top. It does take some coordination and effort to slowly move this material back and forth down the length of the full polytunnel. But as long as there was enough water, it was possible to get the top surface of the polytunnel plastic really clean with this method. And then it was easier to wipe down the sides of the polytunnel plastic with a broom, and then to wash down everything with a hose if it wasn't raining. More recently, I bought a window washer with a telescopic pole for washing the windows in our house. And I find this quite useful for washing the outside of the polytunnel and also for parts of the inside. I don't think this method does as good of a job as a towel being pulled back and forth by two people, but it is more convenient, especially as it only takes one person. And it is easier to keep this washer clean and wet by dumping it in a tote or container with water. And it would probably be useful to add a bit of soap to this water, which would help make the cleaning a bit easier. With this telescopic pole, I can still reach the top of the smaller polytunnel from the ground, but I need to stand on something a bit higher in order to reach the top of the larger polytunnels. This is one of those jobs that is probably better to do much more frequently. And a quick wipe more regularly is probably easier and more effective than waiting until I have the time to clean more thoroughly. And it's probably better to clean smaller patches on the inside of the polytunnel as soon as the crop is removed, rather than waiting until a place is clear so that I can clean the whole polytunnel at once. And I suspect that the older the polytunnel plastic gets, the more frequently I should try to clean it. Scratches in the plastic made by me or by birds or the claws of cats, or accidental damage or other imperfections that can build up in the plastic over time, all seem to be places where algae can become established faster. The most obvious reason for keeping the plastic clean is that it lets in more sunlight, which is especially important if we want to grow overwintering plants when there's already really low levels of sunlight. But I'm not sure how much it actually increases the transmission of sunlight, and I want to find a way of measuring this at some point in the future. But it makes sense to me that more sunlight is better, especially if cleaning the plastic might also reduce the risk of transmission of pests and diseases from one crop to the next. So as long as it doesn't take too much time and I don't end up doing even more damage to the plastic by dragging something sharp or abrasive across it, cleaning the plastic is something that I want to do more often in the future. And the fact that a cleaner polytunnel makes me happier is also important, as it makes the space look better and I find myself more eager to get in and grow things. And that might be the best benefit, especially at the beginning of the season, where it adds to the enthusiasm of the spring, and it feels more like a clean slate to start a new season of growing. The polytunnels are the most expensive and most valuable things that I have in all of the gardens that make up this Red Gardens project. They are really useful growing spaces where I can produce a lot of higher value food, but they're also more controlled environments where I can do more explorations. They also help to create a microclimate that is probably closer to the climate outside that many people who watch this YouTube channel have to grow in, which hopefully helps to make the explorations that I do more useful to a wider range of people around the world. If you like these videos and have the capacity to support my work and help to pay for all of this, please check out the links to my Patreon and PayPal accounts in the video description. But most importantly, thank you for watching.